Welcome back, Soulful Society, to Soulful of Wellness,
the multi-generational podcast brought to you by two functional imperfectionists
and certified coaches
who deliver tips to help you live your most authentic, balanced, and anxiety-free life.
Today's episode, per usual, came about from our personal lives. You can expect to learn some tools so that you can become aware of your stress coping mechanisms, so that ultimately you can lower your daily anxiety and boost your ability to be able to cope in healthy ways. Thank you for joining us for another week of wellness. And if you're new to the Soulful Society, welcome. Thank you for being here. We would love to have you as a regular listener. So if you enjoyed today's podcast, please consider subscribing so that you'll get a new episode of Wellness delivered automatically every Thursday morning.
If you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, we'd love to have you help us out by tapping that 5th star and jotting down a few words about how you feel about this pod.
Thank you to Cindy1_6 who left us a review last Friday titled Inspiring. We're flattered. That says, Kaelynn and Kit's natural flow of dialogue is fun and the content relatable.
We love that, Cindy. Thank you for reviewing this podcast. All right, on to today's episode. We are going to start out by discussing why we need this episode, this content right now. Then we'll share some things we've noticed about ourselves and what we're doing in response to the recent increase in anxiety in our lives. Then the final 2 sections will have 12 different tools that allow us to actually handle, not just distract ourselves from, stress.
Ain't that the word? Distraction. We were discussing about how we've noticed that we've been distracting ourselves more than usual lately. As you know, if you listen to this podcast, we are, we're distractible people.
There's a lot going on.
Our attention is not always, it's not always perfectly focused, but we've noticed there's been too much of that, a sense of being off balance in this area. That's leaving us not feeling good. So luckily, after chatting with each other, we kind of naturally did some investigating through talking and were able to identify this as an, albeit unhealthy, coping mechanism that, funny enough, we both were experiencing, but so classic that we would both be experiencing something at the same time. Ultimately, we were able to connect this to our all too familiar friend and foe, anxiety.
Yes. If you listen to, oh my gosh, I don't even remember when we did that episode. I probably should have looked that up. The episode where we both talked about our experiences with mothers who are not in good health and the impact that has on our lives.
The title was A Soulful Conversation About Grief, and it was released in the winter of 2022.
That is sort of the impetus behind what's creating a lot of the additional anxiety in both our lives right now as the deterioration in physical and mental state happens.
Yeah.
As the course of illness progresses.
If you haven't listened to that episode or are new to the Soulful Society, Kit and I both have mothers who unfortunately are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. And so in that episode, we really broke through a lot of fear we had around being vulnerable in that area and are able to just sort of talk more openly about it. So just want to say we really appreciate you for listening and for reaching out about this. And I think it is helpful to have a best friend going through the same thing. Doesn't make anything necessarily better, but I will say it's definitely helpful. So it's nice to be able to have that safe space where we can just talk about what's bothering us without feeling like, I don't know, a burden to other
bringing people down
or,
when they're just fine.
You know,
and they're like, wow,
yeah.
that's a lot. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and then you feel responsible
heavy.
for dragging everything down. But when you're actually independently going through a similar experience yourself, you don't feel like you're bringing that mood to someone. I just feel validated when I talk to you about it because you understand all the self-recrimination and blame or feelings of deficiency that I have around my ability to be a good daughter who's loving and caring and there to support not just my mom, but my dad, who's the primary caretaker, and my failings or falling short. And, having you there, Kaelynn, to know without too many words what I'm expressing and to know that I'm not the only person to ever feel these feelings. They're part of the tragedy of the illness, I truly believe.
And I think there's such a challenge that comes with living near. So both of Kit and I live about 15 minutes from our parents, which is a huge blessing. And then at the same time, it just creates a lot of cognitive dissonance between guilt and gratitude and just all of these emotions that I think I didn't realize I was stuffing down a little bit and really distracting from it because I'm not living in the house anymore. I did that for a few months and it was in my face and it was the most challenging few months of my entire life. And although I don't live there anymore, there's this weird dichotomy of feeling like far away from it, but still so close to it. So even if I haven't interacted with my parents in a few days or haven't seen my mom in a week, I forget that there's some underlying buzzing anxiety that's always there. And so I don't know why I was surprised this week when I could feel myself just experiencing anxiety, mainly in the afternoon and the evening, just uncontrollable overthinking and, all the symptoms that come with it, wondering to myself, where is this coming from? Mm-hmm. And then it was after talking to you, Kit, that I was able to identify, oh, you feel like you're distracting yourself a lot lately. Like I could understand that something was off, right? I haven't been present in the moment. I've been on technology way too much to my detriment. So it was just helpful to be able to talk through that and learn that distracting ourselves is a behavioral response to not dealing with our experience of anxiety, which is essentially not dealing with the feelings that are buried.
I just, as you were talking, came up with the term that I'm coining live in real time right now. It's emotional white noise.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm creating
emotional
white noise so that it can drown out. I don't have to feel the uncomfortable feelings associated with the downside of anxiety, frankly, and the negative emotions and the self-recrimination and the blame and the responsibility and all those things that we don't want to feel. I'm muting them by generating this white noise, utilizing different percentages of my brain on different activities so that there's only so much brain space for the things causing the anxiety. And that's kind of me grasping at control in a situation that feels out of my control.
Wow. I'm really processing that, what you're saying, and taking it in. Honestly, that's such a good way to describe it. Like this feeling of running away in your brain. Like that's kind of how I feel. It's like if I'm moving fast enough, it's just too easy as well. It's right at my fingertips. The social media, the phone, everything. I was even watching Netflix while I was cooking. It's like, can I not just have silence?
I did that 2 or 3 times this week. I was sitting on my sofa. Okay, so let me paint a little picture of what this white noise might look like. I'm sitting on my sofa. 40% of my brain is watching Love is Blind. 10%'s wondering if I'm hungry enough to warrant actually getting up and doing something about it. 20% of my brain's focused on the Freestyle Solitaire game on the iPad on my lap. 15% is thinking about something worthwhile, maybe the podcast, and trying to brainstorm creative new episode ideas. And that only leaves 15% to worry about how earlier today I was at my parents' house and my mom was just a day. It was a day and it was so uncomfortable to witness. And by distracting my brain with all those other things, only 15% of it has to deal with what I actually need to process. Because I need to process it. No way out but through. Said it before, say it again. So then I decided I was hungry enough for a snack. So I got up off the sofa, got the computer, and was still doing all those things, including the Netflix, just now instead of on the TV, on the computer, on the counter, next to the stove. Like, that's pretty bad.
I mean, it's not that bad
It's
because
like diabolical. It's like,
no, I have a problem too. Like, it's getting to the point where I'm like, are you okay? Like, clearly you're not okay.
No,
like,
I look very
so
not okay. I'm sure, had anybody seen, nobody was here to see, but.
Guys, we're not okay. Honestly, like, I've gotten to the point where, like, there needs to be noise. It needs to be a podcast. If it's not a podcast, it needs to be music. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing something, there needs to be something on the background. It's to the point where I'll get so distracted and I'll have my sweet puppy waiting on me for something. And I'll be, like, in the middle of pouring his food and just have better write that down. Or like, I just want to check social media. Or like, I'll be doing a task and interrupt myself. I'm just constantly interrupting myself and adding more to the brain. And it's like, and just sitting at night, like, let's say I decide like I'm going to commit to just watching television with my husband at this point. I looked at him and I said, I feel like there's too many tabs open in my brain. Like, because I'm constantly going and adding all these tasks within tasks, once I finally sit or lay down, it's too much and everything has caught up with me.
So you said writing things down. When
on my phone, yeah.
do actually have a thought that's valid or important or something I really need to take action upon in the future, I have to write it down then and there because I'm self-aware enough to know that once that thought goes through my brain, like almost in one ear, out the other, it's gone forever. And if I don't jot it down then and there, like stop the world, I need to get off and write this down level emergency, it's gone forever. It leaves a trace, like a slug trail, that niggles at me because it says there was something actually important earlier. You didn't write it down, so I won't remember what it was, but it'll bug me because I'll know there was something. So it's that emergency list thing going too. So I do often have to stop and jot that down because I'm like, ooh, that one's actually important.
And it's interesting that the way anxiety comes out, I'll just use myself as an example, is I'm irritable, I'm sharp, I'm quick, I'm sad, I'm annoyed, I'm in this general malaise, and I don't understand why. And it frustrates me even more. Why am I upset? There's nothing to be upset about. Forgetting underneath that iceberg of emotion, there's like, I'm thinking about my mom or an interaction that I had or some guilt that I'm having or, just unprocessed emotions that I thought that I was processing. I'm like piecing this together. I feel like a detective through talking with you, through talking to JC, to opening my journal and realizing this is weird for me, you guys. I'm now journaling in 10-day increments. Like I'll go 10 days without journaling. That's a long time for me. I'm someone who at least, doodles, writes something down every few days. And what I'm realizing now is like, it's all catching up with me. It's a way to really release these emotions that are beneath the surface. And so all these emotions are coming out through stress. And I think to myself, oh, I'm just so stressed about everything, quote unquote, going on. There's too much going on, when in reality, that's just adulting. So then, stay with me, my inner gremlin shows up and is like, wow, you can't even adult? Like, you're so stressed over adulting? Like,
right.
Get with it. It's only going to get harder.
19-year-old could handle this.
Right. And it's like, wait till you have a baby. Are you kidding? You can't handle your life right now. But reality is, I'm not stressed about the adulting. I feel like that's all a cover. It's just interesting the way our brains play tricks on us.
That's the
it's all just a cover.
Self-recrimination. And a lot of that comes into play because that's the gremlin when you're in the weakened state, asserting its little seize the moment and just trying to belittle and undermine the self-esteem and the self-confidence. Mm-hmm. And it'll low blow you. It'll say like, okay, what's like a basic thing? Handling life as a functional adult. Well, I'm going to tell you that you're not even capable of that because that's foundational. If you're not even capable of that, then really what are you capable of? So that's the gremlin coming in and saying like, I see your defenses are down. Taking my moment.
Mm-hmm. And so the coping mechanism of distraction makes sense, right? Because if we distract ourselves enough, we can't even hear the gremlin.
Right. It's just numbing. It just numbing. Yeah. White noises everything out. So anything that does get through isn't jarring. You know, when you have the white noise machine to help you sleep, yeah, you're hearing noise, but you become numb to the intense sounds. They're less intense because your brain's going like, yeah, there's noise, so I'm just filtering. Mm-hmm. So like, there's emotion. I don't want to deal with it. So we're just going to be too busy to process negative emotion.
Yeah. Well said.
So effective at times, hell yeah. Healthy? Nah. So I mean, short term, it can get you through. And there are times, like, don't get me wrong. There are times, for example, when I'm in the room with my mom and she's yelling and banging and everything's escalated. Not a good time for me to start processing emotions and crying about it. Like, no, that's the last thing we need at that moment. So yeah, self-soothe, break out the free cell solitaire. And literally did this. I'm just going to tell everyone in the Soulful Society and trust you not to judge me too much. Like, you are on borrowed time with mom. This will be one of your last memories with her. And you were playing free cell solitaire while she yelled. Yeah, my brain needed an outlet. I was still responding to her, still, answering all the same questions over and over and over again. But yes, I was also playing free cell solitaire.
That is your gremlin. That is your gremlin telling you you're on borrowed time. Really, you're such a bad daughter.
Right.
When in reality, a coping mechanism like that in that moment is appropriate. That's what you need at that time. Like you said.
That was a tool that kept me in the room, and I needed to stay in the room. I wanted to flee. So that was an example of where these distractions, short term, can work. Long term, no, because you haven't done any actual processing.
No, I'm so proud of you, by the way. I'm so proud of you. I think we're both
Thank you.
Fight, flight, or freeze. Oh, I'm a freezer. Are you a fleer?
I'm a freeze.
You're a freezer?
No,
okay.
I'm a freeze.
So we're both freezer.
I get confused and I freeze.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
I sit there, I'm like, really? Could this be? I must be wrong. I can't be interpreting this right. This can't be a thing.
But when it comes to like the trauma of our moms, I think we both have a tendency to want to run. I will say, I feel like that is kind of a natural response. I took it a little.
Yeah, I want to run so far and so fast to make it not be. I want to run so that it's not true. Like, if I go far and fast enough, it won't actually be real. Then I can go back and be like, oh, yes, just as I thought. I was totally interpreting everything wrong.
Right. No, so that lends itself to the point of how much you've grown so that you can sit in the room now and not run. So if that takes free free cell solitaire? Is that what it's called?
Free cell
I'm just going to call it
it's
solitaire.
just a variation. Okay.
That takes playing a game on your phone to stay in the room. That's when that distraction coping mechanism is appropriate and fine. Like you said, short term. I think what we're talking about is like, I don't know, it all just continues to build up when you go home and you're continually distracting yourself, which is what I've been doing as well. It's the easy route. It's the escape route. And our brain and humans, we look for shortcuts. It's normal. It's natural. But it catches up with us.
And self-protection or thinking it's self-protection. So I got home and I needed to think about the preceding hours. I didn't want to. I didn't like them. I didn't want those emotions. I didn't want to feel any of it or deal with it. And I saw your message, Kaelynn. We need to do taxes for Soulful LLC. And I have the login info for Maryland.gov. And Kaelynn was asking me for it. And I literally couldn't handle it. Like I never blow you off. And I just couldn't. I sat down on the sofa and watched Summer House instead because I just couldn't do the simplest thing. And then, of course, I was mad at myself for not just doing the simplest thing and giving you the information, but I couldn't. I was just stunted. Does that make any sense?
This makes me feel so much better because I have been putting off dealing with the ants in my kitchen. I feel the same way. This type of anxiety and non-addressed stress I feel the exact same way. Like I can't get it done. I call the place, I leave a voicemail, we're playing phone tag, and I'm like, there are still ants in my kitchen. Why can't I just push harder and address this and call another company, email another company? Like these adulting tasks are like falling at the wayside, and I do the same thing. I start beating myself up like, really? You can't handle this? Are you an adult?
Right. It's a small concrete thing. If it's just that one thing, but it doesn't feel like that one thing. My brain's telling me, and the anxiety in my chest is telling me that it's the thing that's going to do me in.
Yes.
It's not one thing. It's one more thing. It's the one more thing that will break me. And I can't risk that. So I do nothing.
Same. So I distract myself with all these things. And it's sort of like, are we afraid what will happen if we let our brain go to that thing? You know, go to the grief, go to the anger, go to the frustration, go to the fear. And I think in my experience, which I can speak to, maybe not yours, Kit, but I feel like it's my way of self-soothing and mothering myself and almost trying to protect that little girl and that inner child. And it's working against me ultimately, but it's like operating all these tabs in the brain simultaneously, and my laptop literally is almost like you were saying earlier, like a safety mechanism, like distracting myself so that the little girl is safe. Like we don't have to really take this on and be sad, because I also have this fear of being sad every day.
And you can't take it on right now because there isn't enough processing capacity left right now. So it will just have to wait for later.
So what can we do to be able to move
let's turn this around
from distraction?
What can we do?
Well, like we always say, first step, and we learn this in our coaching program, it's awareness. So talk to your friends, talk to us about what you're experiencing, because we can always like walk it backwards, right? I'm talking to you, Kit. I'm like, I got to admit it. Like, dang, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety this week. Let's walk it back. Noticing the behavior, distraction. So we're at this point, right? We've noticed the distraction. Like, what can we do to adjust our coping mechanisms to be healthier?
Saying it out loud alone, on the one hand, you'd say, well, that doesn't change anything. It does change something. You've now let it outside of you, and letting it outside creates space to then deal with it. So just admitting out loud these things I'm doing, and then it doesn't seem so daunting. It doesn't seem so big. It doesn't seem so powerful. Where it felt before, when it was unspoken, like something too big for me to handle, when I say it, it always shrinks and feels manageable. I feel like, oh, wait, I thought it was bigger, but now that I spelled it all out, it's not as big and I can do this.
I think too, segmenting it, we can't go from a 0 to 100, so we can't expect, now that we know we've been distracting ourselves, we can
go from 100 back to 0.
Yeah. I guess the opposite, right? Yeah, 100 to 0. So giving yourself short bursts to practice, not distracting yourself unhealthily, I think is also a good tool to healthily cope with things. So setting the intention, when I'm pouring this dog food, that's all I'm doing. When I'm walking my dog, I'm not going to bring my phone. I want to be in this moment. I want to look at the leaves on the trees. We can't expect ourselves to just all of a sudden go from anxiety to gratitude, in one breath. It's
the good news is that even going from 100 down to 50 or even down to 75 feels so much better. Don't worry about getting back down to 0. Like, just taking some off feels so much better. And you mentioned earlier how easy it is. We have all these devices to occupy our brain. So take some of them away from yourself. Like you just said, not taking the phone on the walk. Be your own parent. Say, just because I can watch Netflix and play on the iPad and da-da-da-da-da, doesn't mean I should. So you know what? I'm going to close the iPad and put it upstairs on the dresser. Like, let me just put one thing away for a bit. It's okay. I can play with it later.
I love that concept. It goes back to self-soothing our inner child and mothering ourselves, like being your own parent. It takes practice, it takes time, and it's what we need the most.
So we have 2 sections of healthy ways to deal with anxiety. First is self-soothing, and we have 5 concrete tools in there. And then we have ways to establish control, which we know are needed because anxiety stems from feeling a lack of control. And we have 7 in there.
Let's do it.
All right. Self-soothing. Number 1, you said work up to this.
Have gratitude. So cultivating gratitude for the tiniest of things, even if it's one thing a day, let's work up to it. Really, really small in random moments. 2,
pet your dogs. Okay, if you don't have dogs, pet any dog or cat.
Cats, bunny,
or whatever is your personal equivalent of petting a dog, because
stuffed animal.
I think non-dog lovers have their version of this. There's nothing better.
Yeah. Full stop.
You literally can't do anything else while you're doing that. They don't let you.
Number 3, watch a candle flame. This one's really nice. Just light a candle and then spend a few moments, doesn't have to be long, just watching the flame. Can be really relaxing.
You can use a glitter jar. You can use a snow globe. You get the idea. Zone out on something. Number 4, iron your clothes. Color in a coloring book. Knit a scarf. Some calm, repetitive, low effort task. And low effort's low physical effort, and it's also low mental effort. Just something that doesn't ask a lot of you.
5, visualization. So visualize a calm, relaxed you. I love to do this before bed because you're already lying there and trying to fall asleep. So visualize something positive. All right, moving on as we wrap up to establishing control, which is ultimately what we're looking for when we're experiencing anxiety.
Number 1, anchor your days with a morning and a night routine. Include a healthy affirmation for yourself.
Number 2, single task. So one task at a time. Just practice mindfulness and take it easy on yourself. Just try it throughout your day.
Number 3, daily meditation. It can be brief A little bit can go a very long way. Just a quiet time. It could be as brief as 4 rounds of 4 square breathing.
4, have a little project makes you feel competent, whether that's finishing a coloring page in your coloring book or a DIY thing around the house. Just do something with your hands.
Number 5, do yourself a favor. Build buffer time when you're scheduling. It could be 1%. It could be an extra 5 minutes. It could be an extra 15 minutes if it's a driving thing. Build in a little buffer time so you don't have that always rushing, always racing craziness, that anxiety that comes when you're always on to the next thing.
Number 6, clean or organize something. A to-do list, laundry, whatever. It can be small, just clean.
Number 7, call it a day. Sometimes it's time to say, I've had enough of this one. I am going to bed early. I'm going to try again tomorrow.
Sometimes that's the best one. Well, as always, so much gratitude to our Soulful Society. We love you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And we invite you to share this podcast with someone you love. And remember to subscribe so you can wake up to a new episode of Soulful Wellness every Thursday.
Remember to give us that 5 stars and write a review. Thank you for listening. Peace, love, and light.
Peace, love, and light.
The Soulful of Wellness hosts are certified health and wellness coaches. This podcast is intended to inform and entertain listeners on their wellness journey. This podcast is meant to enhance, not replace, listeners' care from doctors, therapists, or other medical providers.